We're going to talk about Macbeth, Shakespeare's Macbeth. The date is 1606. You'll recall Shakespeare's dates, which one must know. 1564, 1616. The date of Hamlet, easy to remember, 1600. So if you only remember the date of Hamlet, 1600, you can remember a lot of dates. Why is that important? It's important because the sequence of Shakespeare's plays is important. The dating is uncertain in some cases. Hamlet, a little bit uncertain, but generally, I think, generally agreed upon. So if Hamlet is 1600 and Macbeth is 1606, most of the great plays, the greatest tragedies, have fallen between these two. Still, a couple of great plays will follow. One, perhaps the best, Antony and Cleopatra, the following year. In any case, 1606 were in late Shakespeare the most mature Shakespeare. Now, a little historical background. People should also know about the years of Queen Elizabeth. These were the golden days in many ways of the British, not the British Empire, but of England. The empire was to follow. 1558, 1603, the dates of Elizabeth's reign, or EIGN. Okay. When Elizabeth died in 1603, probably everyone felt that a great time, a golden time, had passed. Of course, they were trying to prolong it. I think maybe a similar situation is in the United States right now. Of course, much shorter. But we'll see. Generally, I think what should we say, the vanity of predicting is just that, vanity. But a little bit of fun, never to be taken seriously, I think. Anyway, in 1603, Elizabeth was succeeded by King James I, who had been King James VI of Scotland. His mother had been Mary Stuart, blah, blah, blah. Not anymore, but it's important that he came from Scotland. It's also important to know that he was a mature man, even a scholar, that he was very interested in theology, and this combination, Scotland and theology, especially moral theology, has a lot to do with why Macbeth is the play it is. When James succeeded to the throne in 1603, among the things he did was adopt Shakespeare's acting company. Shakespeare's acting company had been called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. Very successful, very successful. The king adopted the Lord Chamberlain's Men, and they became known then as the King's Men. This meant that they were in the employ, as we say, of the king. And this meant that from time to time they would present a play to the king for the king's delight. Well, Macbeth was certainly written for James I. Remember those two facts. First of all, Scotland. Second of all, moral theology. Okay. 1606 then. This is one of those plays based on chronicles, but it's not a chronicle play. That is based on accounts of history, in this case Scotland's history. Macbeth really was a king in 10th century Scotland. Roughly at the time when Hamlet was living, in fact, but the two facts are unrelated. In fact, around 1066 is the historical time of Macbeth. Okay, enough background. Opening scene. The three witches, as they are called, weird sisters, as they are in the text, but sometimes witches. Let me tell you one other thing. It's very interesting to go from Hamlet to Macbeth. Hamlet, the longest of the plays, by far, for reasons that I think I explained. If not, I think I'll slip this in now. There are three versions of Hamlet. There's the first folio version. Must know, I hope I told you about the first folio too, but just in case I didn't. Shakespeare died in 1616. His business partners and friends in 1623 published what is called the first folio. The first folio was a collection of all the plays of Shakespeare, 36. Most people would say 37 is the full load. This is the most important book in the English language and one of the most important books in the world. A miracle, I think. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but because there really are miracles in literature, but this is a wonderful occasion, because this means that for virtually all of Shakespeare's plays, we have a version that at least his partners and fellow actors thought was solid, was legitimate. In the case of Hamlet, we also have the first quarto and second quarto. I won't explain these terms, but books of Hamlet. And there are variations of lines. As a result, and because Hamlet is so popular and famous, anyone who edits or puts out an edition of Hamlet wants to make sure to put all of the lines from all three versions into that edition. Result, a very long play, and almost certainly a play that Shakespeare himself would not be very pleased with. Not that it's bad, but that Shakespeare himself would have cut out a lot of those lines. Anyway, we pass from that, remember 1623, first folio, a big date, to the shortest of the plays, Macbeth. Now that's interesting. Here we have the folio version, and it is very slim, very compact. No fat on this one, as there is, frankly, fat on Hamlet. So, the result, one thing we notice is that many of the scenes are very short. Act 1, Scene 1 is 11 lines long. Act 1, Scene 1 of Hamlet is 160 lines long. And that tells a lot about the general texture of the play. 11 lines. In those 11 lines, the three witches, we come to know them, and we realize we better try to understand them. Who are they? Excuse me. We see right away that they have some supernatural capacities. For example, foreknowledge, F-O-R-E, foreknowledge. They know many things that will happen. Now, some of that knowledge we will come to see is based on the fact that they understand people and how people work. And I suppose if one understands a person, if that were possible, one could, in most cases, predict that person's behavior. In the case of the witches, though, they have knowledge beyond just understanding people. They have supernatural knowledge, some supernatural knowledge. They also have some supernatural powers, as we'll see a little later, too. They can go from place to place at supernatural speed. So, who are they then? They are certainly forces of the evil of the universe. They are servants, so to speak, of Satan, if you like. Later we meet Hecate. Hecate is the classical queen of the witches, queen of the dark side of the moon, queen of evil, but she's a minor figure. In fact, wherever she is, I like to skip those two little parts of the play. But the witches definitely work for the forces of evil. Now let's understand right away what the forces of evil want. This Americans and Westerners mostly don't deal with at all. And alas, the preachers even and the clergymen don't deal with it very often, I think. Not very coherently anyway, I think. But James the First of England certainly dealt with it, because this is precisely what interested him so much. What do the forces of evil want? What does Satan want? Well, he wants our perdition, our damnation. He wants our souls, as we say. He wants us to go to hell, let's say. Okay, let's ask why, though that's not part of the play. Why? Presumably to spite God, to get back at God, because he, Satan, Lucifer, the rebellious angel, had rebelled against God, and in a huge war of the good angels against the bad angels, the bad angels, of course, had lost that war. Paradise Lost, written by Milton, a classic, somewhat unreadable, but absolute classic of English literature. Paradise Lost is precisely about this, Lucifer, the fall of Lucifer, Satan, and his subsequent tempting of Adam and Eve. Paradise Lost. Well, Paradise Lost was written around 1640, 1650. That is, just a little later than this, so we are fully in a Baroque era. Too many things to talk about here. In any case, back to Satan. So how will Satan do this? How will Satan lure us to our perdition? I think the best way to explain it is the traditional way, at least, that the divine attributes of God, the three cardinal, the three great virtues of God, attributes, faith, hope, and love. That's what God is, let's say. More than that, because the attributes go on and on and on, but those certainly in the Christian God. Faith, hope, and love. So long as we have these in some measure, presumably, we can be saved. We are still open to God and God's influence and God's grace. If we lose these, of course, we lose God's grace, we lose every trace of God, we are damned. That's what Satan wants. Okay, so we watch the three sisters and Satan in the background trying to deprive Macbeth of these divine virtues, faith, hope, and love. Okay. The struggle then ensues. Okay, Act 1, Scene 1, the three weird sisters, at last we can begin, are out on a moor, that is a heath in Scotland, a desolate place where there are no trees, just some vegetation, beautiful places in the spring, but desolate places other times, this heath. They, of course, are out on the heath, and they say, fair is foul and foul is fair. The weather is terrible. Fair is foul and foul is fair. Okay, well, then we get into these paradoxes that fill the play too. Paradox, I think most Koreans know. I won't define it. Contradiction having meaning. How can fair be foul? Fair means beautiful, foul means ugly, terrible, and foul is fair. We're immediately into this paradoxical atmosphere of darkness and evil and lack of clarity. The whole play, by the way, with only some brief exceptions, takes place at nighttime or at dusk. That is, never in the clear light of day, almost never. And when it does happen in the clear light of day, irony, lots of irony. Because if there is one point about the play, it is that there is no moral clarity, there is no lucidity, there is no absolute moral clarity in this world. There is no clarity of anything in this world, frankly. Least of all, moral clarity, I think. Fair is foul, and foul is fair. And if we don't think so, we should look more closely. Certainly, that's what happens in Macbeth. Anyway. And then they say, when shall we three meet again? We'll see Macbeth later. That's what I mean. We understand right away that they have supernatural powers. They will see Macbeth later. They know it already. And how could they know that? They couldn't know that. They do. Then, opening scene, scene 2. We meet the king, Duncan, who is a kind, aging man, very kind, a saint, really. He is the king, the kind of king countries should have, a father figure, and that's important. Gentle, generous, a worthy king. He is riding across a field, riding across his country with his sons, Malcolm. Malcolm is the important one. The other one, Donalbain, not so important. Malcolm is the older son. And a man comes riding toward them, a captain, a soldier, comes riding very hard. Malcolm recognizes him because this man had helped Malcolm before. And he brings news from about the battle that's happening, because a battle is happening. A man named MacDonald is rebelling against King Duncan. He's brought some soldiers from the Western Isles, the Hebrides, and this captain brings news. The rebels are defeated, and they were defeated especially by Macbeth, who was a huge hero. So our first sense of who this Macbeth is he's a great soldier, a great fighter, and a great patriot, and a great and loyal servant, loyal subject to King Duncan. He's also a relative of Duncan. So right away, this captain tells them how Macbeth and his friend Banquo, another great hero, but not as great as Macbeth, cut through many soldiers, and Macbeth went straight at MacDonald and cut him in half. Cut him this way, just from chops to cut him vertically, dead. Oh, great hero, says Duncan, and everyone says, wow, what a guy. This is wonderful. The captain is wounded himself, and they tend to him, but hooray, the rebels are defeated. What a great guy that Macbeth is. Then, forgetting the sequence here, then we get news from another messenger. No, a few hours have to pass here, so I better get the sequence straight. Anyway, I messed up with the sequence. Anyway, a few hours later, but near the same part of the play, another messenger comes. No, I see. Sorry. I know too much of this play, really. It leads to too much information. Anyway, it turns out that the rebels had been helped by a man, a nobleman of Scotland named the Thane of Cawdor. Now, Macbeth is the Thane of Glamis. A Thane is like a lord. So Macbeth is the Thane of Glamis. The Thane of Cawdor had helped the rebels, and so Duncan tells his followers, go tell Macbeth that Glamis is going to be put to death, he's a traitor, and that Macbeth now will inherit, so to speak, all the powers, all the properties of Glamis. He will be, as his reward, also the Thane of Cawdor. I'm getting these mixed up, but stay with me. That's his reward. He's now Thane of Cawdor. Okay. Now, then later we hear about another battle. Macbeth and Banquo had gone to fight another battle the same day, this one against Norway, because Norway had sent some troops to fight against Scotland. They tried to surprise the king and take over. Macbeth killed them all. Didn't kill them all, but the battle was brief. Macbeth defeated them completely. What a guy, that great Macbeth. Now, the news will be that Duncan will ride across the country to his home, and he will stop off at Macbeth's castle that night and sleep at Macbeth's castle that night. Okay, my sequence is a little wrong, but it doesn't matter. Next scene. Macbeth and Banquo are riding across a heath. Suddenly they see the weird sisters. Now before Macbeth sees the weird sisters, his very first words in the play are, "So fair and foul a day I've never seen." Hey, wait a minute. Didn't the weird sisters say fair is foul and foul is fair? And Macbeth's first words in the play, "So fair and foul a day I've never seen." Now he means something else. It's a fair day because a great day of victories, foul, terrible weather. But the point for us is that his words echo those of the weird sisters. And this should suggest to us that somehow they are, as we Americans say, in his head. They have somehow some influence on him, and he doesn't know it, but we know it, and it's very important. Okay, then Macbeth sees the weird sisters. They call to him, "Hail, Macbeth, Thane of Glamis." He knew that already, one of them says. The second one says, "Hail, Macbeth, Thane of Cawdor." This is strange. The third one says, "Hail, Macbeth, that shalt be king. You will be king." Whoa! Macbeth starts like this, guiltily. And Banquo notices this, and Banquo says, "Why do you start?" and react as if this were bad news. This is nice. And it's a good question. Why does he start? Why does he act guilty? This is good news. He can only be acting guilty, reacting guiltily, if in fact he had already coveted, to want badly, the throne, the crown, and had even thought about killing or doing something bad to get the throne. Right away. Evil everywhere. Okay. Then Banquo turns to them and says, "Do you have any news for me, weird sisters?" Banquo doesn't quite believe any of this. By the way, Banquo had greeted these creatures as, "Are you natural?" And throughout the play, even more than paradox, is natural, unnatural. Now we had that throughout Hamlet too. There was natural and unnatural behavior. It was unnatural, after all, to murder one's brother and take his wife and become king. Many unnatural things happening. It's a little unnatural to spy on one's child. Maybe. I'm not so sure of that. But that permeated Hamlet. If it permeated Hamlet, it absolutely satiates Macbeth. Natural, unnatural. Many unnatural things are going to happen here. Many. Okay. And Banquo also says, you all are you natural or unnatural? You have beards. And we learn that these women have beards. This is very strange. Do you have any news for me? Hail, Banquo, less than Macbeth and greater. Whoa. Hail, Banquo, you won't ever be king, but you will beget kings. That is, your descendants will be kings. Well, this is good news for Banquo, maybe. This is bad news for Macbeth, because soon we're going to wonder whether Macbeth has any children or not. If not, why? And the whole play is going to raise a question like that, and we're once again on natural, unnatural turf. And Macbeth and Banquo talk to each other. And Banquo says some wise words, which Macbeth will not understand. We can't say that. Macbeth will accept only at the end of the play. It's very interesting. It's one of the interesting things of the play, most interesting for me, really, because Shakespeare shows us how selective we are in our hearing. Of course, we can't understand everything we hear. We can't absorb everything we see. We're surrounded by literally billions of minutiae, tiny details of life. And if you think about it, we seldom even notice what's around us. We can't. We can't absorb it all and think at the same time of the things we think about. We are so overwhelmed, so to speak, by life, so incapable utterly of taking it in and understanding it and processing it, that of course we are selective. We're selective in what we understand, what we hear, what we choose to understand, so to speak. And Shakespeare, I think, says this in many places, not just in this play, but it is interesting because Banquo says to Macbeth, the forces of evil often tell us truths to lure us into their grasp, to make us believe in them. And that's precisely what is going to happen to Macbeth. But Macbeth chooses to ignore what Banquo says here, because basically Macbeth has chosen evil already. He chose evil before the play, and that is what the sisters know very well. And so the sisters, so to speak, will ensnare the soul of Macbeth, but that soul has already chosen to be ensnared. The play would never contradict the idea, the Christian idea, that man is free. Man is free to choose evil or good. It's true that the world is full of temptations, and there are some powerful forces at work in the world to lure us. The play shows us that. The play also shows us that these forces work more strongly on some people than on others. And from this point of view, our guilt becomes a little reduced, I think. Because what we see in this play is a great man. I've told you about what happens in tragedies before. And Macbeth is a great tragedy. Macbeth is a great man, greater far than us, far greater than we are, than you or me. And I'll show you why later. But there are weaknesses in him. He, for some reason, decides he wants to be king. And one of the most terrifying things of the play is he doesn't know why he wants to be king. He doesn't even know that he wants to be king. So the moral ambiguity of the universe is what the play is about. I keep saying that, but it's all true. That is what the play is about, this and this and this. It is about all of these things as we go more and more deeply into the play. Moral ambiguity, that is, did he choose to kill Duncan? Yes, he did. Why did he choose to kill Duncan? He doesn't know, and we don't know. Well, this is scary, but I think in the end it's true. It's almost as if the play says, and by the way, this is Homer too, at their deepest, I think, maybe. If we think we know why we're doing something, maybe we ought to look more closely, because maybe we don't even know why. If we think we understand ourselves, of course we are fools, I think. That's an utter illusion, I think, in anyone, even the wisest of the wise. And I think that's true of Christ and Buddha too, or in the versions that we get of them in this world. Sorry, but I think it's true, and I think they knew it was true. And that's what part of their wisdom, like Socrates. His wisdom lay in the fact that he knew that he didn't know. And I think it's true of Christ and the Buddha too. And all we have is versions of these people. And the versions depend a lot on the capabilities of these writers to present these the vast depths of these people. But back to Macbeth. Sorry. Okay, this is going to take more than an hour, maybe. Is that okay? We're on. I'm giving you a very, very in-depth, sophisticated version of the play and of other things at the same time. And you guys are middle school and high school students. We're over our heads here. You should, and I know that, and Dr. Shin knows that, of course. These questions are the deepest questions imaginable, really. So I think you should treat this lecture as an exercise in vocabulary, in the jargon almost of intellectualizing of intellect. Try to understand these words, and if you watch this film enough times, try to understand the questions at least, and the issues raised by this play. But this is vast. This is, for me, the result of 40 years of dealing with Shakespeare, really, and with life. And you are 15, 16, and 17 years old, so what can you do? But try to take advantage of this, as obviously Dr. Shin wants you to take advantage of this. If you can, insofar as you can. Back to the play. Macbeth clearly had chosen before the beginning of the play, the evil path. Our metaphors are clumsy here. So, anyway, and the sisters know it. Then, soon after this, a writer, Ross, another noble, a minor noble, but he appears in several key scenes in the play. Ross rides up to Macbeth and Banquo, and Ross has some news for Macbeth, that the Thane of Cawdor had been a traitor, that Duncan gives the title Thane of Cawdor to Macbeth. Wow! Perfect timing. That is, perfect timing to make Macbeth believe in the weird sisters. He shouldn't. He should listen to Banquo, because Banquo said that often the forces of evil tell us truths to lure us into trusting them, and hence evil. Macbeth didn't listen. Banquo did. But Banquo is a great man, but Banquo is no Macbeth, because Macbeth is a greater man. After all, what is Shakespeare's task here? Shakespeare is going to tell us a tragedy in which the tragic hero is a villain, kind of a bad guy. He kills his king, he kills lots of people. He's a real bad guy. He is our tragic hero. Whoa! What's Shakespeare doing here? He's not taking the mostly lovable, somewhat lovable Hamlet. That would be an interesting question. Who is more lovable, Hamlet or Macbeth? I think that's a good question. Shakespeare, in any case, his challenge, perhaps, in this play, because every work of art presents challenges, and it's interesting to watch the challenges that the artist presents to him or herself. Shakespeare's biggest challenge is to make us maybe not like Macbeth, but respect him and regard him as a hero in some way, all the way to the end. But everyone else in the play is going to regard him as a villain and a real bad guy. This is interesting. We are going to get to know Macbeth real well. We know him from the inside. Others know him from the outside. Well, as you can see, this calls the whole question of moral judgment, moral ambiguity in front of us. Everyone else judges him as a bad person. We will not like him, but respect him, and I think look up to him. Respect, look up to, very similar, I guess. And that's Shakespeare's challenge. He mustn't let us hate Macbeth, or the play fails. We're supposed to see how other people judge him, but we are going to judge him differently because we're going to know him well. And gradually I'll let you know what those tremendous qualities of his are, which really raise him above the others in the play, and makes us wonder at the end a lot. Okay, back to our play. Macbeth is taken in completely. He now believes in the weird sisters, let's say 80%, 90 maybe 100, because maybe he had chosen to believe before even the beginning of the play. Okay, Banquo is impressed, but Banquo starts to wonder right away what effect the coming true of this prophecy will have on his friend Macbeth, because both of them remember that the third prophecy was that Macbeth will be the king, and clearly Macbeth wants this. Okay. Next scene. By the way, they're all going to ride now, as I told you, to Macbeth's castle, where Duncan will spend the night. Whoa! This is dangerous. The next scene introduces us to Lady Macbeth. And it's a very interesting scene, and she is a very interesting, even a great character. She is reading a letter from Macbeth, which some messenger brought very fast. And in the letter, Macbeth tells Lady Macbeth all about the encounter with the weird sisters, and then the coming true of the prophecy that he would be Thane of Cawdor. And in this letter, he refers to conversations that they had about his becoming king. Well, Lady Macbeth is very much in favor of his becoming king too. And we have to watch their relationship because it's important. Clearly, they trust each other a lot. More important, clearly, Macbeth trusts her, tells her everything. What a nice relationship, maybe. Now, she is usually played in modern scenes of this play, reading. This is sophisticated stuff here. Sorry, but Shakespeare is not childish reading. She is usually presented reading this letter lying on the bed, and she is sexually excited by the idea of his becoming king and her becoming queen. Clearly, she really likes this idea. He likes it too, I guess. Now, she says, though, that she fears that he is too full of the milk of human kindness to take the easy way. We have to take note of this and really absorb it. In her view, and she knows him better than anyone, he is a kind man. He's a kind man and loyal to his relative, his kinsman, his king, who is like a father to everybody, because that's what a king is, Duncan. She fears that he's too kind to take a shortcut, meaning, and kill Duncan and become king, take the throne himself, usurp the throne. So she will go to work on her husband, and she prays, it's a prayer, to the forces of evil, and she prays them to deprive her breasts of milk, life-giving, natural, and replace that milk with gall, bitter stuff. And she prays really that the forces of evil make her, unsex her, she says, and make her into a man, make her tough, hard, not kind, gentle, life-giving like a woman, but tough, hard, unfeeling, unnatural. So she is clearly in tune with the forces of evil too, and she will be a huge influence on Macbeth to make him do the terrible deed, make him kill Duncan. She will make him do it. Suddenly, a messenger enters, saying that Duncan will sleep at their palace, at their castle that night. Wow! This is a great opportunity, says Lady Macbeth. And not long after the messenger enters, enter Macbeth. Having ridden for many miles at top speed, the messenger had ridden even faster to get there first. And the first encounter between these two is very interesting. She dominates him, even though he's such a great man. And that doesn't make him less of a man either. Less of a great man either. Her influence on him, her ascendancy, excellent English, over him is very obvious. He enters and says, dear woman, Duncan comes here tonight. And she says, and basically, and when will he leave? I like to tell the kids, students, it makes a big difference how one acts this scene. And it gets the student into drama, because after all, there are many ways to present a play. Timing is key. Facial expressions and gestures are key. Many key questions in Macbeth, how to do Macbeth. Now, I think Macbeth should hesitate when Lady Macbeth says, and when will he leave? And look at her. Tomorrow, he thinks. And Lady Macbeth right away will say, may that tomorrow never happen. That is, right away she is proposing that they kill him that night. He is hesitant. He doesn't like the idea at all. He loves Duncan, and with good reason. By the way, yeah, maybe the scene is still to come. Macbeth's attitude right now is, we will talk about that later. So right away it's important to see, we know that he's been thinking about killing Duncan. We know that he's been thinking about becoming king. But his first reaction to her is not enthusiastic at all. Negative, in fact. Then we get, maybe skipping some, but it doesn't matter, a wonderful scene, maybe the only daytime scene in the play, clear daytime. Banquo and Duncan, the king and the great soldier, Banquo, are riding up toward Macbeth's castle. The outside of the castle is all green with ivy. Ivy is grown on the walls, flowers are growing on the walls, and a bird, the martlet, makes its nest in this greenery. Many birds. Chirp, chirp, chirp go the birds. The birds have their nests. The little ones, the little bird fledglings are in the nests. Nature, nature, nature. And Duncan and Banquo say, oh, how nice, how sweet, nature is here. What a natural place. Well, yeah, but behind the walls, behind these nests, some very unnatural things are happening. This man and woman are planning to kill their king, who is his relative, who is a father. It's like killing a father. This woman has been praying the forces of evil to unwoman her and make her a man. So behind the surface of things lie many unnatural things. But man only sees the surface. We only see the surface, and that will never change. It can't change even. Then in the scene, they are welcomed. My sequence here is a little wrong, but it doesn't matter. They are welcomed by Lady Macbeth, but it's all superficial. That is, oh, how nice, love to have you here, welcome, we love you. But what she's really saying behind the surface, of course, is, can't wait to kill you. In an earlier scene, but I'll tell you about it now, it doesn't matter. Duncan had received Macbeth and Banquo with open arms. had also received the news that Carter had been arrested and killed. And Carter had gone to his death like a great man. He repented, he was sorry for what he had done, he fully accepted his own death. A great man, nothing in his life became him like the leaving it, says someone of Carter. And so Duncan is glad Carter is dead. He was a traitor. And then Duncan says, there is no art, I wish I could quote it exactly, but there is no art to know from the face of people what kind of people they are. There is no way to tell from the face of a man or a woman or anyone what kind of person that person is, what lies behind. I trusted Carter completely, says Duncan. Just then, enter Macbeth. Great coup de théâtre, great theatricality by Shakespeare here. Duncan has just said, I wish there were a way to judge people by their faces, to know what kind of people they are by their face, but there is no way. I trusted Carter completely. Enter Macbeth. Macbeth! And they hug. Wait a minute. Has Duncan learned nothing from his experience with Carter? No, he has learned nothing. Can one learn? In fact, this raises the terrible question, can we learn by experience? What can we learn? Probably the most we can learn is prudence, caution. Can we gain insight from experience? Probably none. Is there any way that we can learn what lies behind the surface of things? Probably none. That's what Shakespeare says anyway, and if he says it, it's wonderful. Then we get that courtly scene in which Duncan says, oh, wonderful Macbeth, you're such a hero. Thank you, kinsman, love you. And Macbeth says, it was nothing, friend, king, kinsman. I would do anything for you. I love you. I love my country. And what he's thinking, we know, is, can't wait to kill you. Exaggerating slightly. Back to the castle then. We're now well into Act 2. Now I have to ask you some questions. I'll ask them quickly because why ask them slowly? Review. What did the weird sisters tell Macbeth? The three, hail, 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 hail. What did they tell Banquo? Second, what key words did Banquo say to Macbeth that Macbeth ignored? But if Macbeth had paid attention to these words, had wanted to pay attention to these words, the play, nothing would have happened. It would not have been a tragedy. What is the status of the three sisters? What kind of man is Duncan? What is the relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth? What kind of person is Lady Macbeth? These and other questions. Review. Stop and review, if you will. And if you can't answer them, go back and watch everything so far. Watch this film again. Okay, moving on, well into Act 2. We're now at evening time. It's party time at Macbeth's castle. Macbeth has left the party. He's alone. And we get him in his first soliloquies. And the first soliloquies show us a tormented man. A man who is wrestling with evil. A man who doesn't want to do what he's going to do. Whoa, scary. Wait a minute. I thought we had free will. I thought if I don't want to do it, I won't do it. No, 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 no. Very often we do what we don't want to do. Very bad things. Say and do bad things that we don't want to do. What does this want mean then? Want means sort of want. What we want to do and what we don't want to do is not very clear to us, to others either. Actually, it may be clearer to others. I want to enjoy myself. That's clear to others who watch me do some bad things maybe. But meanwhile, I'm telling myself, I really don't want to do this. Moral ambiguity, moral lack of clarity to ourselves. The world is morally unclear, as it's unclear in every other way too. Okay, Macbeth is saying to himself, he's here in double trust. I don't want to do this. Oh boy. In one of the soliloquies, geez, is this a dagger which I see before me, pointing toward me? No, that's a little later. I wish I could quote it. I could quote a lot of Macbeth, but some of these speeches I've lost. Anyway, he is wrestling with his soul. Lady Macbeth comes out of the party. They've been drinking, of course. Everyone's drinking. The king, Duncan, very happy, has been very generous in his gifts, has given Macbeth lots of gifts, has given jewelry, a diamond, to Lady Macbeth. And Macbeth is saying to her and to others, and to himself, he's here, he trusts me, he's like a father to me, he is my blood relative, he's been generous to me. I want to wear these generous rewards a while before I think of killing this man. And Lady Macbeth goes to work on him. She says, basically she says, be a man. You talked before, you said before that if you ever had a chance to kill him, you would kill him because you want to be king. Here's your chance. If I had said the things that you had said, listen to this if sentence, students. If I had said the things that you had said that you would do, if you had the chance to do it, I would kill him without hesitation. I know what it means, she says, to nurse a baby, a little baby, on my breast. This is interesting because here's the first mystery. There are 6 mysteries that I'll tell you about as I tell you about this play. Here's the first. Really, there are many more than 6, but 6 interesting questions for which there are no answers, obviously, in the play. One is, have the Macbeths ever had children? Lady Macbeth, after all, says she has nursed a baby, and she knows what it feels like to give her milk to a little trusting baby at her breast, looking up at her, smiling, and all that. But she says if she had made the promises Macbeth had promised, she would snatch that little baby from her breast, trusting little creature, and throw it on the ground and kill it. Whoa, tough woman, hard woman, cruel woman. But she is working on Macbeth, persuading him to murder Duncan. And especially her accusations of unmanliness to Macbeth are very effective. And I like to tell students that women generally we men especially, and maybe Korean men more than some, but American men too, men generally, are very vulnerable on this score. That is, if a woman tells us that we are being unmanly, we are very vulnerable. We become very defensive on this, and we want to be manly. And if we're stupid enough to believe that to be manly means to be cruel, then we will be cruel. Because our virility is being called into question here, and we don't like that. Macbeth doesn't like it. Even a great man like Macbeth, who is a man's man, my God, he makes most men seem like women. He is so tough, so manly. We know that though on the inside he's too full of the milk of human kindness. She told us this, and we know it. And so even he is vulnerable on this. Be a man, she says. And he's inching away from his position of, I don't want to do this. It's an amazing and scary thing. Within 30 lines of this very compressed, condensed play, Macbeth passes from, I don't want to talk about this anymore, I don't want to do it, I trust him, I love him, to, I'll do it. 30 lines. That's scary. If this man can be moved in 30 lines, but then we know already that he was ready, that he had almost convinced himself to do this before. The plans, he was mentally prepared to do it. He tries to resist, but he can't. Why will he do it? To be king? Nowhere is it clear that he so much wants to be king. Do we have to say then, as some people want to say, he does it because Lady Macbeth, his wife, persuades him that it's somehow her fault? I don't believe it. It's true she persuades him, and she persuades him on the score of his virility, but it's not her fault. And we also learn that the forces of evil are in her head, that they are acting on her. But we also know, again, that they could not act on her if she were not well disposed, predisposed in the direction of evil. Because never in the play would the play question that we have free will. We have free will, and King James was very interested in this moral theological question. We have free will, but that free will is acted upon by many things in the universe that we have no control over and don't understand. Not only in the moral universe outside ourselves, but more important, in the moral universe inside ourselves, which we have very little understanding of. Self-knowledge, illusion in this play and elsewhere, I think, in the great works of literature and thought, I think. Anyway, by the end of that scene, Macbeth says, I'll do it. I'll do it. I will steel myself up and I will do it. He compliments her, bear man-children only. If you ever had a daughter, that mystery, did they ever have children? I didn't quite fully explain that. Did the Macbeths ever have a child? If so, what happened to that child? Apparently not. Even though, despite all their intimacy, and very often in the scenes of the play, they're dressed in their nightgowns, and many times in the play she says, come to bed, come to bed. It's part of the moral ambiguity and the ambiguity of the play in general. Okay. At the end of the scene then, Macbeth has decided to do it. I think it's Act 2, Scene 2. Terrible. Now, next scene. Macbeth comes in. He is trembling. It's the most powerful scene in the play. I don't know of a more powerful scene in Shakespeare. Something from Lear, maybe. But the power here is terrible. He comes into the dark room, of course. He's trembling and shaking. His face should be bathed in perspiration, sweat. He should look terrible. His eyes should be sticking out in horror. And he's carrying daggers, knives. And the daggers have blood dripping from them. And he is too out of his mind, really, to even recognize that he has these knives in his hand. Because in this brief scene, suddenly he discovers that he's carrying these knives, these daggers, and he didn't even know it. He is almost out of his mind, but he's done the deed. He comes in, and Lady Macbeth says, did you do it? Yes, I did it. I did it. I wish I hadn't done it, but I did it. And then he starts talking. And is he talking to Lady Macbeth? No, really he's talking to himself. And the sequence here is brilliant, and it all happens in about 10 lines. So follow this closely. What we are following here is the evolution, the evolving morally and spiritually of a man who has just killed all that's good in himself. He has killed all that's good in himself. And what we'll see is step by step, and it all happens in 10 lines. Act 2, Scene 3, I think. As Macbeth, first of all, is talking about, he says, I was tiptoeing past the guards. Oh, I better talk about the guards before I get to this. Duncan, the king, sleeps in an inner room. In the outer room, 2 guards were supposed to sleep all the time. Their job is to guard the king, protect the king. Now, Lady Macbeth's job in this murder, should have told you this before, but it's okay. Lady Macbeth's job was to get those guards very drunk. Well, it's a party atmosphere. Everyone is celebrating. No one suspects any evil. It's been a great day. Lady Macbeth will make those guards drunk. So drunk that they will not know what they're doing. They will be unconscious. That's her job. Then Macbeth will creep in past the unconscious guards, get to Duncan, and kill him. Okay, Macbeth has now killed Duncan, and he tells what happened. As he was walking by the guards, on his way out, he had killed Duncan first. As he was walking out of Duncan's room, past those unconscious guards, one of the guards laughed and then said a prayer, a quick prayer, God bless us. He spoke out loud. And the other guard said, Amen. They woke up, so they were sitting up, and they spoke. And Macbeth says, and he's saying to us, he's saying to himself, and he's saying to Lady Macbeth, I wanted to say Amen. I wanted to pray and say Amen, but I couldn't. I couldn't say it. I couldn't say Amen. I couldn't pray to God. This is step 1. And he has alienated himself from God. What's best in himself? God, virtually the same thing. He's alienated from God. Next, he heard a voice, and the voice said, Glamis and Cawdor have killed sleep, have murdered sleep. Macbeth will sleep no more. The meaning of this little speech is that Macbeth is now alienated from nature. He's alienated from God, couldn't pray. Alienated from nature, he will never sleep again. His sleep will be troubled the rest of his life. And then in the third scene, in the third little speech, all this 10 lines, he starts talking about sleep. Macbeth has murdered sleep. Sleep that relaxes us. Sleep that is nature's gift to us. Sleep that is that will comfort us after the labors and toils and the torments of life. Sleep that, little 6-line speech, and he wants to keep going. He is talking on. And Lady Macbeth says, and what is a key little speech in a play that is full of little speeches, what do you mean? She says to him, what do you mean? What are you talking about? The meaning of those 4 little words, what do you mean, is that Macbeth is alienated from her too. And if he's alienated from her, he's alienated from all his fellow creatures in this world, from humanity. All this in 10 lines. Alienation from God, he's killed what's best in himself. He will never be able to pray to God, talk to God, relate to God, anything. He's alienated from God and all that God is. Faith, hope, and love, for example. He's alienated from nature. Sleep, will never sleep again. And everything else that nature represents, he's cut himself off from. And alienated from humanity, from his fellow human beings. His wife, emblematic of that, representative of that. The gulf that separates them will never be bridged, as we say. They will spend the rest of the play distancing themselves from each other more and more. What an amazing moral analysis. So powerful. Then he notices, what hands are these? He notices what's in his hands, these bloody daggers, these daggers dripping with the blood of this man who was a father to him, his kinsman and his father, his king. Oh, what hangman's hands are these? Hangman's hands, by the way, I'm going to explain that. In Shakespeare's time, kind of brutal, but we're brutal too. When a man was hung for something, of course it was a public spectacle. The crowd would turn out to watch the show. They would hang the man, that is, they would knock something from under his feet so that he was hanging there by the neck. But before he was dead, the hangman's job was to cut him open, cut this man open, reach in, pull out his intestines and inner organs, and hold them up to the crowd. Then we knew he was dead, or he wasn't going to live again. Macbeth talks about having hangman's hands. His hands must be terrible, covered with blood, disgusting, frightening. And Macbeth is shocked. He didn't even know that he had the daggers in his hands. And Lady Macbeth says, "What are you doing? That wasn't the plan. You can't have these daggers. The daggers must be left there by the two drunken guards." Because, of course, the plan is to blame the guards for killing Duncan. "Fool! Go back and take the daggers back." "Not me. I can't go there. I can't. I won't. I can't." He's out of his mind with guilt and with the sense of the consequences of what he has done. "Okay. Be a man, of course," she said. "I can be a man. I can do anything a man can do, but I can't go." She says, "Give me the daggers. I will take them back. And I will rub the blood on the sleeping guards." And she even makes a joke about it. That's how hard and tough she is. By the way, when she came into the room, she said she had made the guards drunk, and she says, if Duncan had not resembled her own father, she would have killed the man Duncan herself. What a woman! But at the same time, she's also making us aware of some nature in her. This means there is something natural about her. If the man had not resembled her father, she would have killed him. Wow, what a woman. Tough. And now, getting back to after, when they're talking about the daggers and all that, she says important words. What's done is done. Wash your hands, a little water, a little soap, and it's done. Don't worry about it. A little water and a little soap will wash off all that blood, and then go to bed and sleep. Well, she's very naive about the ways of evil. She's also tried to be this creature which neither she nor anyone can be, I suppose. Hard and cold as a stone. Unfeeling. She tried to make herself unfeeling. Very soon, though, quickly we'll see that that's not possible, that she didn't, because later, of course, she will fall apart. She will deteriorate. She will go mad. And if we're watchful, we can see this already when she said that she would have killed Duncan had he not resembled her own father. That's too much nature. That much nature will lead to her disintegration, falling apart. Okay. So, just then, in this great scene, I don't know that there's a better scene in Shakespeare. How could there be? Just then we get the famous knocking at the gate. Just when the horror and the emotional intensity is unbearable, we get this knocking at the gate of the castle. This knocking should be very loud. After all, the theater is dark, the room is dark, the stage is dark, it's hard to see clearly anything. Scary already, and we get this immense, loud, frightening knocking at the gate. I imagine it's about 3 a.m. now, maybe 4 a.m. by now. Terrible time, and Lady Macbeth says, don't pay any attention to the knocking, get ready for bed, go to bed. Put on a false face and pretend to be cheerful and happy. Nature, of course, dissembled unnatural behavior from here on, but even before. Now, the next scene, very famous scene, the porter. I'll deal with it briefly. The porter is a funny man, the only clown in this very gloomy and grim, macabre play. And he is awakened by the knocking at the gate, and of course he must go and open the gate. So he's walking across the stage, yawning. He's in his nightgown. He looks silly. People laugh when they see him. And people used to wonder, why did Shakespeare put this funny man in this, right, almost connected to the scene of ultimate horror? And the arguments go back and forth. But I think the only explanation is that, okay, two explanations. One, he wants to return us to our natural existence, which is not so horrible as the moment we've just had. This porter represents normal, natural humanity most of the time. But some people think that the laughter of the porter scene, in a sense, increases our horror at what Macbeth did, and you could almost say at the falseness of appearances of life. I can't remember, but I'll get it back. Anyway, choose your version, but the porter walks across the stage saying funny things, reminding us that the knocking at the gate should remind us of the knocking of the gates of hell, and Jesus' harrowing of hell in Christian legend. Christ was crucified, we say, on Friday. He descended into hell. The third day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Easter Sunday, he rose again from the dead. What did he do on Saturday? He went to hell and harrowed hell, Harrow. That is, he took out the good people, Moses, David, Solomon, the heroes of the Old Testament, who of course were in hell because there was no paradise, there was no heaven, because of course there was nothing to hope for until the coming of Christ. Christ brings humanity hope for life after death, for eternal life in the bosom of God, let's say. So, in plays, I'm talking too much about this, but the more you know about it, the better. The knocking at the gate resembled Christ's knocking at the gates of hell. And Macbeth is kind of thinking about that too, because Macbeth is basically aware that he will be in hell. He becomes dimly aware that he is already in hell, as his moral understanding, which is already very deep, becomes deeper. I skipped a soliloquy, a famous one, when he is wrestling with himself before murdering Duncan. And before Lady Macbeth comes in and tells him, be a man, go kill him. He has this vision. Is this a dagger that I see before me? Its handle toward my hand. Thou marshallest me the way that I was going anyway. The point is, he has a vision of a dagger in the air. And that dagger is so real to him that he can see it and almost touch it. Why is this important? The dagger is not real, we say. It's a dagger of the mind. He even thinks that. But two things we should think about first. Macbeth is a visionary. He is a man who has visions. He's a man of intense imagination. He shows this in the speech about sleep, murdering sleep and all that. He shows it again and again. Intense imagination. He's a poet. But he's a visionary. He sees things that other people don't see. His moral understanding, although the poor man is now taken in to evil, that is, it's too late, but his moral understanding is deep and intense. He's more of a believer, I would say, more of a religious man, a more religious man than anyone else in the play. They are the good guys, he's the bad guy. Wait a minute. No. It's just not true. He's a far greater man, I think, than any of the other people in the play. He's deeper. He's more sensitive. He's kinder, maybe. And he has a deeper understanding of things. He is a tragic hero. And so the moral judgments, the moral ambiguities of the play just abound. Okay. Act 3. We're now in Act 3. First of all, who was that knocking at the gate? It was Macduff, a new character who will become a dominant character in the play. Macduff is the Thane of Fife. That is, he's a Thane just like Cawdor was, just like Macbeth is the Thane of Glamis and Cawdor. And the other Thanes, Ross and Lennox and Angus, are noblemen too in the play, minors. Okay, Macduff is there because the king had asked him to come early in the morning and get him up, because Duncan wants to continue his trip homeward. He had asked Duncan to ask Macduff to wake him up. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth come because of this knocking, and they greet Macduff. They talk a little bit, and then Macduff goes in to wake Duncan up. Of course, we know that he won't wake him up. He goes in, they chat a little more outside. Macduff comes back. Horror, horror, terrible, terrible. Our father, our king is dead. Murdered, terrible, horror, horror. What? Says Macbeth. What? And Lady Macbeth says, what? In my house? All this foolery going on. And Macbeth says, I'm going in there to see. And Lennox goes in with him. What's going on here? Don't know. And they talk a little more. Malcolm and Donovan, Duncan's sons, come out. What? What's going on here? Someone murdered Dad. I don't like this. I think we better get out of here. Someone hated our father. Someone has murdered our father. We are in danger too. Donovan, you go to Ireland. Malcolm says I will go to England for safety, and they're right. Macbeth comes back out. Oh, terrible, terrible. Had I but died a little while ago, I would have led a blessed life, he says. Apparently talking about what a terrible thing it is that the king is murdered. But his words are very true. If he had died 2 hours earlier, he would have led a blessed life and gone, we suppose, to heaven. Now, different. And then Macbeth says something pretty shocking. He says, I wish I could have controlled my rage when I saw the guards. But who can control himself under such times, under such circumstances? And we learn that Macbeth, while he was in there, murdered the 2 sleeping guards, who were already covered with blood and had the daggers by them. We know that. Lady Macbeth hears this, and she faints. She falls over and faints. Now, mystery number 2. Is Lady Macbeth's faint real or acting? Real, because she's so shocked at what her husband has done, that has murdered the 2 guards, because that was not part of the plan. And certainly this shows that he is acting on his own now, going far beyond her, and not telling her what he's doing either. Acting, she's a tough woman, and maybe she thought, if I faint, I will distract people's attention from what Macbeth has done, the murder of the guards, to myself, and maybe that's a good idea. Good. Mystery number 2. Okay, now the scenes follow pretty quickly. We learn from other people that during the night, that night when Duncan was murdered, it was a terrible night. Nature was unnatural. And the old man says in a little conversation with Ross again, it said that Duncan's horses, beautiful horses, ate each other. They ate each other. Horses eating each other? This is real unnatural. Lots of unnatural things. Macbeth killing his father, his king, very unnatural. Many things. We also learn, though, that Macbeth has already gone to Scone to receive the crown. He is now the king. Everyone is blaming Malcolm and Donovan for killing their father, paying the guards to do it, but no one really believes it, and they will believe it less and less. More and more they will suspect that Macbeth killed Duncan, killed the guards too, they know that. And this rule of terror in Scotland will begin. Macbeth, a terrible man, cruel king, murders people, takes their things. There's also a rumor about his taking the women, the girls and women. That is this sexuality, but we know that the childlessness of the Macbeths is a mystery in the play because Lady Macbeth has nursed and so forth and so on. Maybe they had a child and the child died. Things happen pretty fast now. In Act 3, Macbeth is going to have a feast, a big banquet at his castle that evening. Tells Banquo, be sure to be there. Banquo says he's going for a ride for the afternoon. Is Fleance, your son, going with you? Yes. Have a nice ride. See you in the evening when you return to the castle. Perfect opportunity to kill Banquo. Why does he want to kill Banquo? Doesn't need to kill Banquo, but he wants to kill Fleance, Banquo's son, because the weird sisters had said that Banquo would not be king, but his descendants would be king. So, moving quickly here, Macbeth hires two murderers, two assassins. He tells them that Banquo is responsible for all the problems that they have had, their IMF, so to speak, and they believe him. And so Macbeth persuades these two men to go out of the castle, wait a couple of 100 meters from the castle, and murder Banquo and his son when they return that evening. Murder scene. Suddenly there's a third murderer. Oh, by the way, Macbeth has said that he will disappear that afternoon. Everyone relax until the banquet tonight and leave me alone. This is interesting. By the way, we know that he doesn't tell Lady Macbeth that he's planning to murder Banquo. The gulf between them widens and widens. Lady Macbeth is not very happy either, by the way. Neither one of them has enjoyed the happiness that they hoped to enjoy by becoming king and queen. And they are not very close either. They, we know, are separated. Dr. Shin, I don't think I can finish. Sorry, I'm going to review where we've been so far in Macbeth. I just taught Macbeth recently, and Dr. Shin said that this was timely to talk about Macbeth, and he's right, but I know too much about it. But Dr. Shin is interested in the topic, and I hope you are too. So we'll continue this some other time. But now to review. A review, the play 1606, King James the First of England had been James the Sixth of Scotland, a man interested in moral theology, and Scotland, of course. The play is an analysis of the effect of evil on the human soul, of real evil. First of all, it's an analysis of how evil works on our souls, but how our souls are predisposed toward evil. After all, Banquo resists, Macbeth does not resist. But this does not mean that Banquo is a better man than Macbeth. The forces at work on him are considerable. The forces at work on Macbeth are far greater. Can we blame Macbeth? Can we say, "Oh, evil man, I would not have done what you did"? Impossible. Impossible. And Macbeth, in many ways, is a man who is superior to us, a far greater man than we are, than I am. I think than anybody, almost anybody. So moral blaming, moral pointing the finger, moral condemnation of other people, dangerous business, hypocrisy, probably. This, by the way, was almost an obsessive idea of the late Shakespeare. It comes to dominate almost King Lear, and King Lear, written and presented the year before Macbeth in 1605. The two plays are almost companion pieces of this late great Shakespeare. I take the three best plays, by the way, to be King Lear, Macbeth, and Antony and Cleopatra. These three, 1605, 1606, 1607, they represent the highest powers of Shakespeare, I think. Anyway, review questions now. A deep question, of course, is... sorry, let's not ask that. I'm reviewing with you. I said that in this play, Shakespeare analyzes the effects of evil on the human soul, a great human soul, both before the person does some terrible thing. Much evil is committed before we act, after all. The drama really takes place, the drama in the soul takes place before the deed. And then Shakespeare analyzes the effects, the consequences of evil action, but possibly more than that, of evil, both before and during and after action on the human soul. And he analyzes it in depth. By the way, I haven't said this, but Macbeth is by far the most Christian play by Shakespeare. Shakespeare's religion no one knows, and I personally think he didn't know, and that's fine with me. That's not a limitation of the man. It's part of his greatness, I think. Not that a mark of greatness is not to have religion, I don't mean that. But for Shakespeare, if Shakespeare had embraced some creed fully, Shakespeare would not have been Shakespeare. Impossible. Anyway, I'll explain that some other time at greater length, if you like. It is the most Christian play by Shakespeare, Macbeth is, because it's the Christian moral universe that it takes place in. The analysis of evil, of what evil and sin are, he wouldn't use the word sin, I think, what evil is, how evil acts in the world and in us, and what the consequences of that evil are. All of this takes place in the Christian moral analysis. He did the play for King James, and James was a Church of England king, but a deep student of moral theology. Does this mean we can't believe that Shakespeare thought this way? I think probably we can't. Did Shakespeare accept the Christian moral analysis of the universe? I think Shakespeare used it for this play. I think he found it interesting. I think he found it deep, persuasive even. To say that he believed it, I think it's impossible. Shakespeare used material as great artists use material for their art, believing some of it, believing it long enough to produce the great art even, but always open to new suggestions, and ultimately, I think, believing in the unknowability of anything. And of course that's true. The believer believes that. That's why we have faith. Faith is not faith in what we know to be true, but what we hope to be true. So, no problems here. This doesn't make Shakespeare less of a religious man even, really, I think. But no utterly convinced believer in some creed, I think. And that's okay. Anyway, that's what Macbeth is about. An analysis of evil, its effects on the human soul, before, during, and after some evil action. The effects on an extraordinary man, a great man, a man whom maybe it's difficult to like, though I like him in Act 5. There are reasons still to like him. To admire, though, yes. To respect, definitely. A visionary, a deep thinker, a deep feeler, a man of feeling and imagination, a man, by his wife's own admission, who was kind, a loyal friend and kinsman, who nevertheless kills his father slash king. Great stuff. Okay, thank you.